Okay, this section's all about landing page optimization. So a landing page is a page on your website that someone ends up on after they've clicked on one of your ads. So landing page optimization is creating different pages that get more of your visitors or more of your clicks to convert to leads or sales. And it's really important because your landing page really is where the rubber hits the road as far as your AdWords is concerned. Because you can be targeting the right people in AdWords and you can be presenting them with the right message in your ads, but if your landing page doesn't then continue that conversation and convert them to being a customer, then essentially you're wasting your money. There's a few caveats at this stage. I don't claim to know it all by any stretch, although I am going to share what I do know. And what I'm going to tell you in the next sort of 15 or 20 minutes is basically rules of thumb, and it's my rules of thumb, and you should go out and test these things. But hopefully I'm going to point you off in the right direction. There are AdWords specific quirks to creating landing pages, so it's well worth reviewing Google's terms of service actually. So in Google's terms of service, which I'll link to beneath this video, there are certain things that you are allowed to do and not allowed to do. So things like having pop-ups on your landing pages, for example, will normally get your pages barred in Google. Removing all the navigation and only having what's known as a squeeze page with only one action people can take, Google don't like that either. And it really comes down to something called the My Nan test. So if you were to send your grandma to your landing page, would she be treated well, and would she know what she's supposed to do? That's really the acid test. So if you're popping up banners and exit pop-ups and all this other stuff, then your Nan probably isn't going to like that, and that means that Google aren't going to like it either. So you just have to play the game. So first of all, you need to open the AdWords landing page optimization documents, which I've linked to on the webpage that this video is hosted on. And this document outlines some of the main things that I think you should be thinking about when you're working on your landing pages. The first thing that I would do actually is I'd go into AdWords and I'd have a look in a report called your Auction Insights, and have a look at who your main competitors are. So you can access your Auction Insights by going into AdWords, going to a campaign that you're interested in, and then you can go to Details and All on the Auction Insights. And what Google will do is they'll show you which other advertisers are bidding on the same terms as you in that particular campaign, and they'll show you which advertisers generally are ranking above you. So that's interesting in itself, but then what I would do is I would look up these advertisers and I'd have a look at their landing pages. And things that you want to look out for are what propositions did he make? So what offers did he make people? How did he back up those offers? Did he have any social proof? Did he make any guarantees? So a guarantee is a really good way to position yourself against your competitors. So do your competitors make any guarantees? And have a look at whether their ads really correlate to their landing pages. So does the landing page back up what the ad was saying? So that's the first thing to do. What you're going to do then is you're going to identify for each of the keywords in your account what the most appropriate landing page is to send people to. And this sounds really obvious, but a lot of AdWords advertisers slip up by not sending people to the most appropriate landing page. If you have a keyword where you feel that you don't have a particularly good landing page for that keyword, then you either need to remove that keyword from your account, or you need to set up a page on your website about that particular term. And this, for example, if you have an e-commerce site, may be a case of playing around with your e-commerce categories. So I was looking at a website this morning to do with dog coats, and a lot of the terms actually that I was looking at targeting for this website were to do with particular breeds of dog, so things like Springer Spaniels or Border Collies or Greyhound coats, that sort of thing. But there was only one proposition page for dog coats. So actually what this website needed to do was to create a different page or a different variation of this dog coat product for Greyhound dogs, for Springer Spaniels, and so on. So you might need to set up some more pages, even if the product itself is essentially the same. Sometimes you might have to send visitors to a splash page first. So a splash page basically asks people to make a choice. So if you sold a product, so let's say for example you sell windows or something like that, where you target trade customers and residential customers, then sometimes what can actually work better is to ask people up front whether they're a trade customer or a residential customer, and then present them with a page that only speaks to trade or residential, depending on what they select. So that can work quite well. What you're going to do next is have a think about the initial orientation that people go through when they land on your landing page, and have a think about the site structure. So I've pulled up a few examples here, but the thing that you're going to look at first is what is the initial focal point of the landing page. In other words, what do you notice first? And the way that your visitors use your landing pages is that when your landing page loads, they'll scan the page in essentially a bit of an F shape. So I've actually loaded up a couple of pages to use here. So one of the pages that we're going to look at is called lead pages. So what happens when I first load the page is that I scan the page very quickly in kind of an F shape. So I scan across the top, I scan down the side, and then if there's any headlines here, I'll scan across the headlines, and I'll make a snap decision on whether or not I'm in the right place to find a solution to the problem that I'm experiencing. So the main focal point here is obviously the video. So this leads into explaining the benefits of lead pages, but it's worth noticing here that they have a call to action deliberately above the fold. So without me having to scroll down, I can see what the next step they want me to take is. On this landing page, which is one of the pages that I use for my own AdWords campaigns, I've taken a much more of a stripped back approach, and that's as a result of testing different things. But the focal point of this page really is my face. So again, what happens when this page loads is that people scan it in an F shape, so they'll scan across the top. So if you follow where my cursor's going, they'll scan across the top, down the side, and then they'll scan briefly across. And in this case, their eyes will probably dart across to my face because I'm making eye contact with you. And eye contact is extremely powerful. It's an evolutionary trait that we have, where if someone's making eye contact with you, then we almost can't help but look. I've also pulled up a product page on a website I was looking at a few days ago, because this illustrates quite a different approach, and I suspect that this page isn't very effective because it's actually very busy. So this page has multiple columns, so they have kind of two smaller columns down the side with ads. They've got a main section in the middle, and I just feel like there's a lot vying for my attention here. So actually, I don't really feel like there's a focal point. If anything, the focal point is probably this bulb, which is good because that's the product that I would be interested in buying. But I feel like there's a lot of other things on the page that are taking attention away from the focal point. So just think at the moment that your landing page should have a focal point, and that focal point should be relevant to the action that you want people to take. The header on your page is the top section. So it's generally the area where your site identity and top menu is. And in general, the header section on your landing pages should really be quite minimal. You might want to test this and test different things, and you might very well want a different header on your AdWords landing pages to the rest of your website. So I actually do this on the landing page that I showed you previously. So this header up here only contains my logo. And what I found actually is that I've moved my main navigation actually to the bottom of the page. So I don't go against Google's terms of service because there is navigation here, but it's just at the bottom of the page. And I actually found that increased my conversion rate from 15% to 25%, which is a significant increase for me. The lead page of site also uses a minimal header at the top. So if you notice here that actually this header section doesn't take up much real estate on the page, which leaves a lot of space on the page for the main message you want to convey to people. So I think the thing to take away from this is to really minimize what you put at the top of the page. So I think what you do want is you want some sort of site identity in the top left. So you want some kind of logo in the top left. And maybe a contact element in the top right. So maybe you could try having a phone number in the top right. But I'll try and minimize the amount of space that this section takes up. In terms of columns, this is a bit of a moot point, but in general I would stick to 1 or 2 column layouts. In general, if you've got a lead generation site, I tend to find that a 1 column layout tends to work best. So what I mean by a 1 column layout is, if I come back to my own landing page, so this would be a 1 column layout. So essentially we have 1 block of content in the middle. And this essentially starts to resemble more of a long form sales letter. And I found that for lead generation that can work quite well. If you've got an e-commerce site, then what I would do is I would start off by using 2 columns. So I would have a primary column that probably contains your product image, and then I would have a secondary column that contains your navigation and category headings and that sort of thing. You don't want to take my word for that, you want to test that, but I would start off by testing 1 or 2 columns. If you have a page that has 3 columns, then you generally find that there's too many things on the page competing for your attention. If you have more than 1 column, it's generally best to protect the left-hand column. So if you're going to have a second column, try putting it on the right. And the reason for that is because when someone scans your page, remember that they're going to scan it in an F shape. So their eye is going to come down the left-hand column. So you want to protect this and make sure that you have good content in the left-hand column. I don't think it's a good use of your space to have a navigation here, so I would put your primary content along the left hand column and then move any secondary navigation to the right. Again, you probably want to test that, but that's what I've found has been more successful in my testing so far. You probably want to have different navigation on your AdWords landing pages to the rest of your website. So the only navigation that you want should be relevant to the searcher and the searcher's current level of understanding and what they might be interested in. If possible, you want to minimize the navigation. So generally the more options that you give people, the less likely they are to take the option that you want. And the option that you really want is for them to hit buy now or make an inquiry. So I would really think about limiting your navigation, and you might want to have a separate navigation for your AdWords landing pages than you do for the main website. If you have an e-commerce store or any sort of store that has a reasonable number of pages, then I think you do want to have a search box. I'm told that 50% of web users are search orientated, and by and large we are now conditioned by Amazon to reach for the search box. So I think it makes sense to cater to this. So I would consider having a site search on your website. There's also advantages of doing that because then you can see what keywords people are entering into your site search box, which is another useful thing for your keyword research. So I'd definitely consider adding in a site search. Once your visitor has taken a first orientation and established that they may be in the right place to find an answer to what they're looking for, the next thing they'll look at is, who is this website? Who is behind this website? And are they credible? Can I trust them with my credit card? Maybe would I send my grandma to this page? In short, is it trustworthy? And there's things that you can do here. So what I would stick to having a conventional layout. I would have your logo in the top left. I'd have your contact details in the top right. I would generally include a strapline by your logo. I think a strapline can position you apart from your competition, but you want to think quite carefully about what you put in your strapline. And this is certainly something that you can test. My colleague Ben Hunt tests a lot of straplines in his landing page optimization, and he comes up with some dramatic increases in conversion by testing different straplines. A few pointers. So if we have a look at my website, so I've basically got my name as my logo and straight talking PPC advice as a strapline underneath. Your strapline wants to say something where if you were to say the opposite, it could still be construed as a benefit. So if I were to say complex, in-depth PPC advice, then that would be the opposite of this strapline, but it would still work. So what you don't want to say is you don't want to say great PPC advice, because if you were to say terrible PPC advice, then that is something that you would never say. So saying something like great pay-per-click advice isn't a good tagline because it's basically a given. People already expect that. So what you want to say is you want to say something that could be construed as positive if you were to say the opposite. And I think that you also want to say something that's going to really position you compared to your competitors. So the angle that I really take in my business is that hopefully I come across as approachable and I don't mince my words. And that's really the position that I've decided to take in how I position myself against the other alternatives. And I think that you need to think about that in what you use for your tagline. So once your visitor has orientated themselves and they've established that the site identity is credible, then the next thing to think about is thought sequences. And this is the sequence of thoughts that you ask people to go through as they look through your landing page. The first thing, I feel quite strongly about this, so in these things there's often grey areas, but I do genuinely think that every AdWords landing page should have a headline. David Ogilvy, who was one of the greatest ad men of the 20th century, once described ads that don't have headlines as headless wonders, and the same is true of your AdWords landing pages. You should have a headline, and that headline should generally be the focal point of the page. So it should generally be one of the first things that you notice. So you might need to make it bold, you might need to increase the size, and it should be relevant. And if possible, it's worth trying to get a benefit in the headline. The sequence that I then suggest that you go through is you then need to describe the problem. So you need to describe the problem that people are experiencing when they get to your landing page. So essentially they say, yes, that is my problem, you have my attention, how do I solve it? And you may need to get better clarity on who you are and who you're not selling to. And you may need to narrow the description of the problem that you solve to a particular audience, or at least create different pages for different audiences. But the first step really is to describe the problem that you're solving. So if I come back to my landing page, so something that I do talk about here is that I talk about my friend Paul, who runs a local valeting service, who had managed to waste a lot of money on AdWords, and that really sets the scene. That really establishes that yes, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and that really gets people's attention. Once you've described the problem, then what you need to do is you need to make people a proposition. So you need to say that, if you give me your email address, I will give you a free report that shows you how to solve X, Y, and Z. Or if you buy my products, then it will solve your problem in this way, that way, and the other way. I think that sharpening the proposition your landing pages makes is often the biggest opportunity for improvement. So one of the things that you can consider trying is a negative promise. So you say something along the lines of, my product does not result in, does not contain, does not need, involve, or require, or my product does not cost this, it does not waste this, it does not consume this. And that can be a great way of positioning your proposition kind of relative to other alternatives on the market. I often find that talking about what people are afraid of losing has a better impact than what they are looking to gain. Again, you probably want to test that, but I think that's well worth testing. So by not signing up for my AdWords report, I talk about how much it could cost people in continuing ad spends just from common mistakes that they can fix easily by reading my report. So that's a fear that I try and draw on, and that seems to work quite well. And quite often there's benefits to be had by making your promise more specific. So what exactly do I get? Can you offer a guarantee, or what Perry Marshall calls a ballsy guarantee? I often get asked how long a landing page should be, especially for lead generation sites. There's a lot of talk about whether you should be using short landing pages or long landing pages, and there is no concrete answer to that. The answer is that you have to test it. But what I would think about is the thought sequence that you're asking people to go through. If what you are offering people is not a big leap in terms of their current understanding of what their problem is and what they think that they need, then you only need a short landing page. If you are asking people to make quite a big leap in terms of their current understanding to the point at which they are ready to take the action that you want, then you need a much longer landing page. And you're going to have to list all the possible reasons why someone should take the action that you want them to take. Claude Hopkins, who wrote Scientific Advertising, described this in a way that you wouldn't let your field sales team go and visit a customer and leave without talking about all the possible reasons why the prospect should go ahead with the deal. And your webpage essentially does the same thing. And it's thinking about how much of a jump you're asking your visitors to take, and then that will dictate how long the page should be. I put a note on here about images. Images should be used selectively on AdWords landing pages. They should be relevant to the product that you're selling, so product images should be high quality, and really all images on your landing pages should either tease or demonstrate. If an image fails to tease or demonstrate, then it is decoration and should not be used. Where possible, I would include captions underneath your images, because research has shown that people read the captions underneath the images. And it can work quite well to use people's faces. So like I use on my website, it can work quite well to have someone's face looking at you. And again, what research shows is that men tend to look at women more than they do at men. Women also look at women more than men, but they look at babies more. So that's a few things to think about. You also want to think about all the reasons that a visitor might decide to not take you up on your offer. So these are objections that you're going to have to address on your landing page. There's a lot of talk about knocking out objections, and I don't really like that because it positions things as a conflict between you and the visitor, where you're trying to knock out all the objections. And I don't really like that approach, because when a visitor has an objection, it's a real thing in their mind, and even if it's a misguided thing, then because it's important to them, it should be taken seriously. In Harry Brown's book, The Secret of Selling Anything, which I highly recommend, if I can find the link, I'll put a link to it underneath this video. But Harry talks about something called listen, agree, suggest. So when you're dealing with objections in the sales process, what Harry recommends that you do is, instead of belittling the objection, that you listen to it, you agree that it's important, and then you make a suggestion of how this can be overcome or how your product overcomes it. So if you follow that structure, then you don't inadvertently tell people that they're being stupid, which is what you're doing when you're knocking out objections. And instead of making it like a you versus them approach, then it basically positions you as like you're working with them to get what they want, which is really what you're trying to do. It isn't always appropriate, but a competition comparison can sometimes work when you're thinking about objections why people might not go ahead. So you might want to compare your product to other options on the market. And then whatever proposition your page makes, you're going to need proof. You're going to need to back up your claims and prove that your product fulfills the offer that you're making. The bigger the claim and the more money you're asking people for, then the more proof that you need. So this can be testimonials, it can be case studies, video case studies can work really well. And there's other things that you can do as well. So you might want to talk about how many people use your product, how many customers you have. You might be able to borrow some credibility from suppliers, from customer logos, that sort of thing. But you definitely need to have proof on your AdWords landing pages. Most AdWords landing pages have what Glenn Livingston calls proof hiding disease. Do not have proof hiding disease. Make sure that you back up all your claims. If you can get some proof above the fold, so without people scrolling down, then that's even better. A great way to finish off your thought sequence is to have what Perry Marshall calls a ballsy guarantee. A ballsy guarantee makes you look like you're taking a terrible risk, when in fact that you're not. So the structure that you follow with the ballsy guarantee is that you say, if you use my product, follow these steps, implement the process, do the work, I guarantee that such and such a result will happen within so many hours or days, or else I'll refund your fee, change the product. And you can make this as strong as you possibly can. The most important part is that you have a qualification statement up front, so that people have to qualify for the guarantee by actually implementing the product and doing what they need to do in order for it to be a success. And this is a great way of really positioning yourself against your competition, because your competition generally won't do this. And you can be quite creative in the guarantees that you create, and you can test different guarantees, but I would strongly urge you to think about adding a guarantee to the thought process that you're asking people to go through on your AdWords pages. Number 5 is the call to action. So the call to action is obviously very important, and it's where you ask people to take the action that you want people to take. So you can have different types of call to action. So you could have a phone request, you could have a live chat request, it could be an online inquiry or an online order. You might want to test different types of call to actions. You're definitely going to want to test different placing. I increasingly find that it's helpful to have a call to action above the fold without people scrolling down. So if we go back and have a look at the lead pages site, you'll see that without scrolling down, there's a call to action up here, which is obviously repeated further down the page. But I definitely test having a call to action above the fold. Then you want to position it as often as is relevant, but you may want to test placing it in different areas around the page. Generally, a call to action needs to be when someone has read or absorbed the information that they need to go ahead and to make an informed decision. So don't place them too early, but I think that you probably want to cater to the people who do have a good understanding and are ready to buy. So those people will click on the call to action at the top of the page, and the people who don't have a good understanding to start off with and need a lot of information will then convert to the bottom of the page. So you might want to try different placing. You're going to want to think very carefully about the wording of your call to action. So I would avoid wording like submit, because if you ask people to submit, you're effectively asking them to be submissive. And if you walk around in the street and ask people if they would be submissive, then you generally get a slap in the face. So don't ask them to do it on your website. I would avoid school words. So learn more is not a good call to action. People do not want to learn more. They want the benefits of what learning more will ultimately give them. So I'd avoid anything that sounds like work. So inquire now also isn't a great call to action, because I don't want to inquire. I want to get the benefits of what the product actually does. You might want to try reducing the options. So often giving people less choices tends to work and tends to improve your conversion rates. And you can also try something called a yes option. The yes option is something that I've borrowed from a chap called Sean D'Souza, and it works like this. So if I come over to the sales page as it is at the moment for the AdWords Survival Guide, then what I have at the call to action is, instead of a yes or no, I have two choices. I have a regular option and a premium option. So basically one includes a 60-minute consultation with me, which when you compare the differences is a good discount on what I normally charge for that. So instead of now being a yes or no, it's a yes or yes, and that can work very well to improve your conversion rates. And then above all, is it clear to the visitor what's going to happen next? So there's a saying that a confused mind says no, a clear mind says go. And your website visitor needs to be crystal clear on what is going to happen next, what they're going to get, what they will need to do. So you need to have explained all of this on your landing page. So make sure it's clear what happens when they click the button. Stage 6 then is thinking about what content you can cut out. Cutting out content is one of my favourite things to do on landing pages, and taking out anything that's not relevant. So thinking about the thought sequence that we're asking people to go through, taking out anything that is not part or superfluous to that thought sequence. So just to recap where we're up to, because we've been over quite a lot of ground in this video so far, and it's gone on a little bit longer than I anticipated. But the first step was, first of all, to send people to the right page. So you might need to create more pages on your website for particular audiences and particular keywords. Stage 2 was then to orientate them, so to provide clues immediately when someone lands on the page that they're in the right place to find an answer to the problem they just searched for. Step 3 then was the site identity, so making sure that you have a strong, cohesive site identity. Step 4 then was really the primary or the bulk of this landing page work, which was thinking about your thought sequence. So taking people from the point at which they're at the moment to the point at which they're ready to take the action that you want, and what thought sequences you need people to go through in order to get to that. And then step 5 was having the call to action, having the right calls to action, having them in the right place and with the right wording. Quite often you can get big improvements in your landing page results by chopping out everything that is not part of that process. Again, you need to test, but quite often there are things on your landing pages that you can take out, and normally they will improve your conversion rate. I've got a few notes here on different tools you can use. So if you are allergic to HTML, And the idea of going in and creating web pages is scary, then that's fine, and you're in very good company with that. I use a couple of landing page creation tools which I recommend. I use one called Unbounce. I'll show you a demo of in a video just after this one. And I also use a product called Optimize Press, which is only in WordPress. It's a WordPress plugin or theme, but that also allows you to create high converting landing pages very quickly. So I'll show you both of those products. You're probably going to want to use some sort of landing page testing software. I personally use Visual Website Optimizer, and I occasionally use Content Experiments and Google Analytics, which is a free product. So essentially what that does is that allows you to create two different variations of a page and send half of your traffic to version A, half of your traffic to version B, and to find out which version performs best. I've heard good things about Convert Experiments, although I've not got any first-hand experience. And many other solutions exist, so really find one that works for you and master it. The guys at Conversion Rate Experts published a comprehensive review of the different solutions available, so I recommend that you read it. Finally, if you're really interested in landing page optimization, my recommended reading is Landing Page Optimization by Tim Ash.